Hey everybody, we have a very special guest with us here in Brookago on the Spawn of Me podcast. I have been enjoying the hell out of the High Score documentary over on Netflix. Of course, we as a gaming podcast love to be able to talk about the history of the industry in lots of different ways, and we have Melissa Wood, who is one of the directors of that documentary, on the show with us today. Melissa, how are you doing? How's everything going?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited about the reception for the series, and it was an incredible project to work on, and it's been so rewarding that people seem to be enjoying it. So very
I'm
happy.
I'm I'm hyped to have you on for a couple of different reasons. Because one, I am a big fan of nostalgia. I love talking about and finding other people who have, done that work of digging deep into the history of the gaming industry. I'm curious about how you got attached to this project. Was this a thing that you were like, I've wanted to always tell this story? This is a conversation I've always wanted to see.
Well, I have to share the credit for the genesis of this series with my creative partner Franz Kostrel.
Mm.
She actually, at Great Big Story, they did a series of short docs about the video game industry called 8-Bit Legacy, which actually went on to win an Emmy. And she and our other executive partner, Courtney Coop, sort of saw the potential for exploring these stories, saw that there were so many other gaming stories and creators that their stories had not been told, and felt like it really could go to long form. So they went to Netflix and pitched it. And Franz and I had previously worked together on another series for Showtime called Darknet, which is about it's a very different tone.
I did
It's
see
about,
that. That was
yeah.
awesome.
So slight different tone, but basically has to do with how technology is changing the way we live for the worse. So this is a nice way to sort of still explore technology, but to celebrate technology, and also to bring in this nostalgia, which I think especially now with the times that we're living in, and obviously we couldn't foresee what would happen in 2020. But I think nostalgia is like a comforting blanket that you can just sort of forget about the world for a little bit. And so it is nice that for at least a few hours, maybe people can watch our show and kind of forget about what's going on, and then deal with it in a couple of hours.
Yeah, I'm happy you shared that because it was that for me. Like getting to run through the series and feeling like it was, besides the fact that I've been gaming for pretty much all of my life, um, getting to see the stories kind of come back about things that I remembered from my childhood of,
Yeah.
remembering the first time I got a chance to play on a Street Fighter cabinet, or remembering when I got my Atari for the first time, and then like seeing those small snippets of footage was fantastic. But I think the thing that pulls it all together is not just the kind of nostalgic pieces around the hardware, which we usually kind of see. We see those stories happen often about the genesis, literal genesis of the Genesis, and things like that. But the stories of the people behind those particular games and consoles and iconic figures that we saw in the space, when you started to go through the process of trying to pick who you wanted to focus on in the documentary, what was the kind of thought process around like who were the folks that you wanted to pick for this?
Yeah. Well, we knew that we wanted to have a variety of perspectives
Mm.
on the gaming industry. So not just the programmer, but we wanted to have the composer who creates music that influences the way we interact with the game and the way we feel when we're entering a space, or a painter whose images has made the immersion so much more. Or we just wanted to. We didn't want it to be a series of vignettes that repeated each other, or all the well-known stories where we'd be rehashing kind of what people already know. We just really felt like we needed to approach the history of video games in a fresh way, to show different perspectives, We did try to be inclusive and, bring in underrepresented, contributors to the industry as well. And that's been something that people have talked about a lot. And I'm so grateful that people are talking about it. I wish we had done, in some ways when we finished the series, I felt like we had fallen short of the mark. So it's interesting to hear that people talk about it so much. And it shows me that that the bar is pretty low and that more needs to be done in the video game industry. Yeah, we just wanted we wanted the show to feel immersive and engaging and surprising. And that meant showing it from as many different viewpoints as we possibly could.
Yeah, it's interesting that you shared the conversation about the of course the lack of diversity and the lack of those stories being told in real ways. It is weirdly, like I think about it often because our show is the foundation of that is doing some of that work in a podcast form, right? And I think what I'm always surprised at is the constant refrain that I hear about, oh, I never knew that. And that part to me is always troubling because it's one of those things where it's just like, we're just so bad in this industry of like telling our own stories, and then especially telling the stories of folks who are kind of on the periphery and haven't had their chance in their day in the sun. It makes
Jerry
me actually
Lawson is a perfect example. I mean, Jerry Lawson, there's so many people who still don't know his story. We actually did some digging, to find it. And it's baffling.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a lot of conversations that often happen in the gaming industry, and especially from the community, often where speaking directly from our community, the African American community, the conversation has been about like, we want more representation. We'd love to see more characters who look like us. We want to see more people in higher prominent places look like us. And the retort usually to that conversation is, well, what have you contributed to the space in the grand scheme of the conversation? I'm like, if you understood the story of Jerry Lawson, half the people who were complaining about that things wouldn't even have the consoles they have today without Jerry. So it's fantastic to see you all dig into that with his family and Karen, and it really pulled together this beautiful moment of all of the Lawson children and the young child in that group, seeing the history kind of come to fruition through their eyes and through their memories and through that stuff. I'm curious about what those days were like when you filmed that stuff, because those things are hard. Those are not easy pieces to kind of pull back up of like, here are some memories that of your family member that passed away, but the ability to humanize that space in a way that feels genuine to not only them and their vibe, but to the legacy and memory of Jerry. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, I have to give credit to our director, Sam LaCroix, for filming that, and our co-producer, Alex Miller, who worked with the family directly. So I can't speak for how they felt about it, but I know that they were from the very beginning really on board with telling the story because they are proud of their father's work. He contributed an amazing amount, an amazing amount to the video game industry. And his story is still largely unknown. So they were totally on board for sharing anything they could about Jerry Lawson. And I haven't actually, I haven't reached out to them to see what they think of the show. But I think putting it together, we used animation to tell his story. And we had amazing art directors who we would edit the sound together and then say, can you create the visuals for this? And there was something just amazing when we open with Jerry Lawson removing something and we see his face sort of peering into this cabinet with, electrical cords and stuff. To see him come to life, because we didn't really know how we were going to visualize the story. Yeah. Jerry Lawson's no longer with us. We're going to film with his family, but how are we going to connect with this person who made this amazing contribution? So I really have to give it up also to our art director who animated that scene, because I feel like in that moment, he really became a person who
Mm.
you identify with, and who you understood his curiosity. And, you know, um, I don't know. It was very, that to me was the most emotional part of working on that story. It was finally seeing him. And it's just too bad that, you know, he's no longer with us and can't see that, you know, his legacy is being celebrated.
Yeah, again, kudos to the art team because those beautiful animated vignettes that they kind of pulled
Mm-hmm.
together the story. It was one of those
Mm-hmm.
things that can go really really weird and cheesy, or it can feel like it really hits, and it really hit. It was like beautiful to
Yeah.
see um how they brought Jerry to life in those moments, and it really did kind of showcase the curiosity part of Jerry in a way that I didn't expect to have like actual hearts
Mm-hmm.
and feels for in that space, because you know, we all know of his work, but we don't necessarily know of the man himself that much, but through his kids. um
Yeah.
yeah, it was really well done. I think that part landed really 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 fantastically. One of the other folks who I specifically was excited to see and was surprised to see, because I didn't know that he was in the documentary, was the wonderful friend Gordon Bellamy, who, again, his story is one that doesn't often get told in lots of different
Yeah.
ways. What was the conversation around when you wanted to focus on Gordon?
Well, I mean, there's people who create the games, but then
Mm,
there's the people who change the games. And
mm,
I felt like, obviously, the Madden franchise is huge. Um, and so it was important that we covered that. But I think the fact that he brought in players of color into the game was an incredible moment for gaming. It was incredibly symbolic. It was a cultural moment that was just bigger than the gesture itself. So I think that I don't think it can be understated how important that contribution was for Madden. So we just really felt that that was almost as important as the birth of the game itself. Like, the birth of the game is fun and incredible, and Madden's such an interesting character, but um, but you're like, well, of course black players should be represented in this game. um, and it took a while for that to be recognized, but thank goodness there's people like Gordon Bellamy who made that happen. And also, he's just such a philosopher, and I felt like,
mm-hmm.
it's fun to look at games as like amusement, and they're obviously interesting visually, and it's a fun subject, but there's more to them than that. And I think he really spoke to um, what it means to feel marginalized, but to be able to enter a game and feel like everybody's equal, and that he took that feeling and made it a reality, for players in the game when it came to Madden.
Yeah, I mean, knowing Gordon over the past, I've only been in the industry in the podcasting sense for the past 6 years, and getting a chance to know him, he's a pusher. He is a person who is like, I don't care. These are walls. I don't see these walls. We will figure out ways around and through these walls in every way possible, while being one of the nicest people on the planet, which is again, a testament to Gordon and his beauty and his amazingness. I think one of the things that I really appreciated as well was how you captured not only from a story standpoint his connectedness to the larger Madden franchise, and how that did actually change the way that we look at sports games, and his love of football and the love of the sport, but how that energy kind of carried throughout the rest of those of that piece of the documentary too. I felt like y'all did a fantastic job of connecting energies to and through the
Mm-hmm.
particular pieces of stuff. How important was it to kind of like keep the kind of energy moving through each part of the documentary too? Because I felt that was beautifully done.
Thank you. Well, we really tried to embrace the energy of the people that were filming.
Hmm.
And as you said, Gordon does have great energy. And, I think we, this is a story about creators and creative people, and this is their passion. So I think the fact that we were telling stories about people's passions, just being authentic to who they were and the story that they were telling, that's what we really tried to focus on, and felt like if we could be authentic in representing the people who we were speaking to, then it would be something that carries people along with the story.
Yeah, I think I came away learning a lot too, which is a person who's kind of done this for a while. Like I felt that I knew a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
stories and the reasons why and the kind of minutia of some of that stuff, and having friends who have actually like gone through some of that stuff. Shout out to Mike Micah and the rest of those and most of those folks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, like it was really refreshing to actually hear stuff that I didn't know in those pieces, like the woman who won the Pac-Man championship. Like her
Mm-hmm.
story was brilliant. It was
Mm-hmm.
awesome to hear her story and
Yeah.
hear the
Becky
conversation.
Heidemann.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. Was so
And she
cool.
was so much that we also didn't include, and that was the case for a lot of people that we spoke to.
Mm,
We wanted to have a lot of different perspectives. We wanted to, keep things feeling sort of fresh. So we weren't able to really give everybody their due. So Becky Heineman, is kind of legendary for her contributions to games, not just playing the Space Invaders tournament. But we thought it was just, we thought, this is really about the beginning of games. So really we're interested in sort of hearing about her, her being in the first tournament ever, and hearing about that. But there's so much more to her than we were even able to tell. So, yeah, there's, and I'm so glad that you feel like you learned something, because I think that was one of the most intimidating things about doing this project, because we knew that, we had a high bar to reach with the gaming crowd. Like,
hmm.
there are going to be opinions, and there are going to be things that people are looking for. And we knew that we wouldn't be delivering to everybody. But we wanted to deliver something that felt different, that felt personal, that it was less about the sort of game itself or the technology itself, but more about the creativity and innovation of the people who created this industry, and from various backgrounds and various perspectives. So, but if people who know a ton about games also learn something, then that is a bonus for us.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I remember the first time I saw like there's a section of the documentary that talks specifically about Mortal Kombat. And Mortal
Mm-hmm.
Kombat is my like I love Mortal Kombat with my whole heart. Like it is the thing that I have grown up with. I remember seeing my first Mortal Kombat cabinet and hearing those sounds from across the arcade, and then growing up and seeing, all the madness that happened in the Senate and Congress
Mm-hmm.
about, how violent it was and all those things. And it was great to see you all dig back into grab, Tobias and crew, and like talk to them about that kind of stuff too. Like when you kind of went to folks to say like, can you retell your story?
Yeah.
What was the vibe from those folks as well? Because I know that they've done that stuff before, but it feels different,
Mm-hmm.
especially because like we don't see in the gaming community gaming stories get to places like Netflix, like to get to big
Well,
platforms like that. So I was curious about that too.
well, that's key, right? Is the Netflix thing. So
Yeah.
I think people, I mean, it's true that I feel like, so the gaming community has embraced us for sure, and we did not have to do a lot of convincing with many folks to
Mm.
participate, because I think, for one, they're creators and they like sharing their story, but also because it's for Netflix. And I think, um, they knew Netflix is a huge platform, And we also tried to sort of pitch it in that like this is really about the people, and we want to do more than a sit down interview with you. We want to get to know who you are, or film some weird stuff. What are you game for? How do what part of your story do you think that would be fun to share? And I think so including them in on the process a little bit, the creative process of how to tell their story, and also the fact that it would be on Netflix, and so they knew that it would have high production value, really helped. And I have to say, like, I'm surprised at how many people wanted to participate, and so pleased with everyone we got. I mean, I just think, whether they're somebody who's well known, or people like Ryan Best, who a lot of folks have not heard of him or his game gameplay before, but I think they all have interesting stories to tell. I'm so glad that they sort of came together in this one project.
Yeah, that Ryan Best part was beautiful. That was so well done. It was
Oh,
like one of those things, because again, like when you talk about the production parts of it too, that also really stood out to me as well. The cinematography in this documentary is fantastic. It's beautifully shot. As a person who is learning and trying to figure out ways to get better in that space, I was one, very jealous, because I was like, damn, this looks good, and then two, I was just like, wow, the way you've mashed up not only beautiful like actual filming of Japan and all those places that you went to go get this footage, but it felt like it was very personal to each person too. It felt like you were really cognizant of where their spaces were and how those spaces involved the storytelling and all those kinds of things as well. Did you find that mashing up those different kinds of bringing the production together with digital assets, and then filming in 4K, which really comes through in the documentary, that added to the overall package of how this was going to land in gamers' laps?
Yeah. Well, when we started out, we really didn't know what we're going to end up with. We had a plan. We did a bunch of research. We talked to a lot of people. We came up with the basics of what our six. I'm doing this because there was a whiteboard,
Yeah.
and we would write stuff on the whiteboard and erase it and move it around. And we kind of had the basic plan for the 6 episodes. And we knew we were going to bring in a lot of different elements. We knew we were going to bring in animation. We brought in our amazing co-producer, Alex Miller, who found all the incredible archive that you saw. We knew that we were going to use 4K cameras, so it was going to look beautiful. And we have great DPs working on this. But how it was all going to blend. And we also knew that we wanted to include some VFX, because the blurring of the real world versus the video game world, and like how those two merge, and the way you step into a game, was something we kind of wanted to show visually. How those were going to come together in the edit, we really didn't have any idea. And it was a little scary at first, because we were kind of filming something and not really knowing how it was going to link up in the edit. But we just decided to go for it, and that this is a series about creativity. So we were going to have to be creative and not do the same old, and just have faith that we'd be able to pull it together in the end. And I think we just wanted everything to sort of feel surprising, and not a rehash of a story you saw 2 episodes ago, that they should live in their own space. And so we just tried to embrace that and say, let's just film the story the way it feels right, and have faith that we'll be able to pull it together. And there's no rules for this series. The only rule is that there's no rules, and that we have to be interesting.
Yeah.
We have to film everything in a way that's interesting. So, and then so we just had to figure it out and edit.
I loved it. I mean, again, the one thing I always wonder about shows like these and documentaries like these is, one of the best parts of being kind of on the inside of the video game industry is that everyone has that story. Not the ones that you just automatically hear and the ones that actually make it to the final production, but the ones that you never hear, or the ones that are kind of just like the ones that didn't make the cut, but they're still fantastic. Were there any of those that happened during production that you got a chance that you can share, that you remember?
No, I don't think I can share anything that wasn't included, but I will say that You'll notice that in the Atari section, it's all animated and voiceover, and that's because we had to tell the story that nobody else would about the hot tub boardroom parties and smoking and all of that. I mean, we did have a rigorous research process, so it's all true, but no one would verify on camera.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I mean, again, there are some stories that I can't tell either on in that space.
Yeah.
So I totally understand the in the industry we call it the friendier, is what we call it. So
Yeah.
it's nice to hear that that's a part of that too. One of the things that I also am curious about is, like, I know a lot of times when we see folks kind of make these documentaries or tackle these kinds of subjects, they might not necessarily be gamers themselves. They may not necessarily be folks who play in the same ways that a lot of the community does.
Yeah.
You know, were you already in gaming spaces? Did you? I guess the bigger question is, you know, when you came away from this after, you know, doing all the work and knocking it out the park and making it dope, did you also learn stuff or were surprised
Right.
by things as well?
So I'm definitely not a gamer,
Yeah.
and that was very intimidating. So I mean, I've always played video games. So I played Atari when I was very young. Um, I remember very clearly getting Nintendo for Christmas when I was maybe like 9 or 10. I don't exactly remember, but I remember that it was a clear day outside. It was super sunny. I remember going somewhere else and I could not wait to get home to play Super Mario. I remember being totally addicted to Nintendo and like sleepovers and doing it all weekend long. And then I remember playing Doom in high school. So like I've definitely played games, but I would not call myself a gamer. And it was very intimidating taking on this project because I know there's a really passionate community of gamers out there who would be looking at this through a microscope and that we wouldn't be able to please everybody. But I also felt like really surprised. I mean, I love creativity. I love telling stories about people who are creative problem solving. And I just love telling stories about people who are interesting. And so as soon as Franz and I started talking about this project, I just couldn't believe it hadn't really been done in this way before. I mean, during research, we watched a lot of things on YouTube, and there's certainly a lot out there, you know, a lot of sort of background docs on specific games that really go sort of deep in different games.
Mm.
But I felt like a profile of people done in this way in the industry hadn't been totally done. So that was exciting to me to sort of explore creativity and innovation in this industry, and the way making a show like this would allow us to sort of break some usual documentary rules. You know, normally you wouldn't want to blur the line between what's real and what's, you know, between reality and fantasy, but we're able to do it right off the bat with the Space Invaders story and sort of do VFX, bring in aliens, or, you know, and it just felt like this is an opportunity to really sort of stretch my creative wings a little bit and see what happens. Despite the fact that we knew, you know, we had a really high bar to meet in terms of the audience. So, yeah, and I'm coming away from it having been a casual gamer. I have a whole new respect. I mean, I think I've always respected video games, but now sort of seeing what went in, seeing what a new industry this is, seeing what went into sort of creating it, and the passion and creativity that goes into a game, and the thoughtfulness and the game theory and all that stuff. I really think it's an art form. And like so many new art forms, people kind of disregard it as something that's not legitimate, or something that's bad. And I think it's really, for people who aren't sort of in touch with the industry, it's so misunderstood.
Yeah, it is one of the, I think if you ask most people behind closed doors, and most people, you know, on front stage too, they would say that that's one of their most troubling and kind of frustrating parts, is that it is a still very new medium, I
Yeah.
mean, I think about it in terms of my own life, and I'm 42, and it's been for literally pretty much all of my life in that space. So it is great to see, folks like you and the rest of your team, handle it with care in the way that you did, and present it in a way that didn't feel um, in the ways that we usually see those kinds of stories come out. And it was beautiful to see you kind of dig into the people and the why and the how those things kind of affected where we are now in really good ways. I am hoping, and I'm crossing my fingers, that there is going to be a high score too somewhere down the line, because I think there are so many stories that can still be told. And again, you all did such a fantastic job bringing these stories to life, and sharing the histories of all the wonderful people who have made this industry real. So again,
Thank
Melissa,
you.
you and your team did such a fantastic job. Massive amounts of props to you all for doing that. If you do a story and you're looking for wanting to tell us something about Black media, I'm just gonna put my hands up like this and say, I wouldn't be mad being in a Netflix documentary about all that stuff. But I will say this is one thing that I'm hoping for, and I would love to see this story be told. Is my dream, my one hope is that as we have that story about Jerry Lawson be in that space, it is very often that in those conversations about the pioneers of gaming that were Black, there's never really been a story about Black women in that space. And I'm hoping to see someone do that at some point. Like, I'm hoping someone will figure out the way to find those people and have that story be in that space.
Yeah.
So if there is a thing that if you do get the chance to do the second version of this again, I would love to see someone tackle that in a real way, and figure out ways to find those people too. So again,
Yeah.
Melissa, thank you so much for your time. You're
Thank you
brilliant. That documentary is something that I think will last the length of time. And it's a thing that everyone in Brookago here and all of you at home should definitely be checking out and paying attention to. So again, Melissa, thank you so much for your time. We'd love to have you back and talk about more of your projects whenever those come up, because again, you do fantastic work. And again, thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and everybody here at Spoil on Me.
Thank you.
Yo, so that was our interview with Melissa Wood, director of High Score, the Netflix documentary about the origins of video games and so many aspects of the gaming industry. It was, man, I have to say, like, it's something that you definitely should go check out. Like, if you are looking for something that is insightful and taps on nostalgia, especially if you're a little bit older, then you have gone through the era of so many of those pieces of the conversation that winds up happening in this documentary. So you already magically kind of get transported back into your childhood to be able to see how all those things kind of connect to not only the way that you played the games when you were a child, but now seeing just how far we've come in terms of technology and in terms of the space. So I fully believe, and I say this all the time, we live in amazing times when it comes to technology. It is a thing that we have to, sometimes take a step back when you see all the kind of scuttlebutt and all the fussing that happens on the internet with people getting in their feels about a whole bunch of different stuff, to understand just how far we have actually come in such a small amount of time. So massive love to Melissa for coming through. Make sure you check out High Score from Netflix. Make sure you lobby Netflix to get us a show on Netflix. Make that happen and be a thing. Again, I had to shoot my shot. I am not gonna not shoot my shot when you have someone who's directed a Netflix movie up in that piece. So you got to do it. Before we take